was 1969. For American soldiers in Vietnam, the war had settled into a grim, grinding reality. The initial fervor had long faded, replaced by weary endurance. The monsoon season brought with it not just torrential rain and oppressive humidity, but also a deep, soul-sapping weariness. Every patrol was a gamble, every shadow a potential ambush. The line between friend and foe blurred in the thick, suffocating jungle, and the enemy was as much the environment itself as the elusive Viet Cong, photograph-like image of a specific infantry squad of 8 men. Their faces show a mixture of youth, exhaustion, and hardened resolve. Sounds, the sound of heavy rain lessened slightly, replaced by the faint, eerie dripping of water within a dense forest. It was in this suffocating atmosphere that Sergeant Brick Riley's 8-man reconnaissance patrol was tasked with a deep insertion. Seasoned, cynical, and utterly reliant on each other, they were the Hornets. Known for their resilience, there was Riley, the pragmatic leader, Doc Davies, the quiet, servant medic, Private Ghost Garcia, the unnervingly silent scout, and the rest, faces hardened by months of jungle hell, * a hand tracing a route on a worn, old military map. The designated area is unusually blank, perhaps marked with faded, ambiguous local symbols. A specific grid square is circled. Sounds, a subtle, low, almost breathy hum begins to fade in, like a distant, sustained wind through something hollow. * their mission, a 7-day deep reconnaissance into an uncharted sector of dense primary jungle far from known routes. Intelligence suggested a high probability of a hidden Viet Cong logistical base, a crucial target. Local intel was scarce, limited to vague warnings from Montana tribesmen about the Whispering Lands, place where the forest remembers and voices call from the empty air. The warnings were dismissed as primitive superstition, but the Hornets were about to discover that in Vietnam, some battlegrounds were far older than any war, and some enemies couldn't be killed with bullets. * the patrol moves cautiously and silently through an incredibly dense, ancient jungle. Sunlight barely penetrates the canopy, casting eerie, shifting patterns of light and shadow. The trees are enormous, gnarled. Sounds, the squelch of boots in thick, spongy moss, the distant, mournful sound of unseen wind blowing through ancient trees. The air itself seems strangely still, devoid of typical jungle sounds. * as the Hornets pushed deeper into the uncharted sector, they entered a realm distinct from any other part of Vietnam they'd patrolled. The jungle here was ancient, untouched by defoliants or napalm, its enormous trees reaching impossibly high. But what struck them most was the silence, an unnerving, profound silence. The usual cacophony of birds, insects, and distant gunfire was absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness broken only by the sound of their own cautious footsteps. * Private Garcia, the scout, suddenly freezes, holding up a hand. He points to something subtle on the ground, perhaps unnaturally straight lines in the undergrowth that don't look natural or faint. Irregular indentations in ancient trees. Sounds, the silence is absolute for a moment, then a very faint, almost ghostly echo of a human whisper can be heard, distant and indistinct, fading quickly. * Private Garcia, the silent scout, was the first to feel it. He stopped abruptly, his hand raised, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. He pointed to faint, unnaturally straight lines in the forest floor, or subtle indentations on ancient trees, not man-made, not animal tracks, but something else. And then, from the absolute stillness, a very faint, ghostly echo of a human whisper seemed to drift through the air, distant and indistinct, fading as quickly as it came. They looked at each other, confused, dismissing it as jungle echo. * the squad finds a small, unsettling clearing. It's too perfectly circular, too devoid of growth. In the center, there might be a single ancient gnarled tree that seems to pulse, faintly with an unearthly glow or emanating a strange coldness. Sounds, the ambient silence returns. A low, sustained hum, like a deep resonance, emanates from the clearing. The air around the tree visibly shimmers with cold or distortion. * on day 2. Their patrol led them to an unnatural clearing, perfectly circular, too symmetrical to be natural, eerily devoid of undergrowth. In its center stood a single, massive ancient tree, its bark gnarled and twisted like tormented faces. A profound, unnatural cold radiated from it, and a low, sustained hum, a deep resonance, seemed to emanate from its very core. The air shimmered faintly around it, distorted, by an unseen energy. Asterisk close up on the squad's faces. Some look skeptical, others uneasy. One or two are visibly unnerved. Doc Davies touches the tree tentatively, then recoils, shivering. Sounds. Doc Davies' sharp intake of breath. The ambient hum from the tree increases slightly, then suddenly cuts off, plunging the clearing into a heavier, more oppressive silence. Asterisk Sergeant Riley, ever focused on the mission, ordered them to move on, dismissing the anomaly as a geological oddity. But Doc Davies, reaching out to touch the ancient bark, recoiled sharply, profound chill racing through his hand. The humming from the tree, which had been subtle, suddenly cut off, leaving behind an oppressive, echoing silence that pressed down on them. They had entered the whispering lands, and the forest had acknowledged their presence. Asterisk days 3 to 5 of the patrol. The jungle is increasingly oppressive. The light is dimmer. Shots focus on the soldiers' increasing weariness and paranoia. Sounds. The ambient jungle sounds are now distorted and disorienting. Distant whispers seem to follow them, always just out of reach. The echo effect becomes more pronounced, repeating their own footsteps or hushed conversations. Asterisk days 3, 4, and 5 became a torturous descent into psychological warfare. The promised Viet Cong base remained elusive, overshadowed by a far more insidious enemy. The forest itself seemed alive, observant, and hostile. The whispers returned, no longer faint but closer, seeming to emanate from the very air around them. They were not human voices, but distorted, echoing fragments, their own names, phrases from their past, twisted into unsettling murmurs. Asterisk A. Soldier E.G., one of the less prominent squad members, suddenly calls out, pointing. He sees a clear image of a Viet Cong soldier, or perhaps a loved one, in the distance, only for it to vanish into thin air. He scrambles forward, confused and panicked. Sounds. The soldier's desperate call, the faint echo of the illusion's voice. A subtle, high-pitched, mournful wail that seems to weave through the trees. Asterisk. The jungle began to play tricks on their minds. Illusions flickered at the edge of their vision, fleeting glimpses of Viet Cong soldiers in ambush positions that vanished when fired upon, or heartbreaking visions of loved ones back home, calling to them from the shadows. Asterisk. One of the men, driven to the brink, broke formation, chasing a phantom image, only to find himself entangled in thick vines. His desperate cries echoing back mockingly. A high-pitched, mournful wail began to weave through the trees, a sound of profound sorrow that chilled them to the bone. Asterisk. Close up on Private Garcia, his face contorted in pain. He's clutching his head, mumbling about too many voices. Doc Davies tries to calm him, but Garcia recoils, seemingly seeing something terrifying behind Doc. Asterisk. Sounds. Garcia's pain, mumbling incoherent whispers, the echoes of multiple overlapping voices, both male and female, distant and close, some seemingly speaking in ancient Vietnamese, others in distorted English. Asterisk. Private Garcia, the silent scout whose senses were usually his greatest asset, was now overwhelmed. He clutched his head, groaning. Too many voices, they're all talking at once. Doc Davies attempted to soothe him, but Garcia recoiled, his eyes wide with terror, seemingly seeing something horrifying behind the medic. The whispers now converged into a cacophony of overlapping voices, ancient Vietnamese, distorted English, all echoing, all seemingly trying to penetrate their minds. Asterisk. The squad finds themselves in a clearing that looks disturbingly familiar. Perhaps the circular one from day 2, but now it's subtly different, more menacing. The ancient tree at the center seems to pulse with a malevolent light. Sounds. The hum from the tree returns, deeper, more resonant, almost like a heartbeat. The whispers and echoes are now emanating directly from the tree itself. Asterisk. By day 6, lost and disoriented, they found themselves back at the unnatural circular clearing. As if led there by an unseen hand, the ancient tree in its center seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent light, its gnarled branches stretching like skeletal arms. The low, resonant hum now emanated directly from the tree, and the multitude of whispers, the chilling echoes, seemed to spill forth from its very core. This wasn't just a sacred place. It was a prison, a source of profound, ancient power. The squad is trapped in the circular clearing. The light is dim and ethereal, casting long, grotesque shadows. The atmosphere is intensely claustrophobic. Sounds. The humming from the tree is now deafening, vibrating through the ground. The echoes, distorted screams and frantic whispers, creating a cacophony of terror. A chilling, almost serpentine hiss permeates the air. Asterisk, the game was over. They were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted, trapped in the circular clearing. The humming from the ancient tree intensified, a deafening resonance that vibrated through their very bones. The echoes became a chorus of screams and panicked whispers, a maddening symphony of terror that threatened to tear their minds apart. The chilling, serpentine has returned, stronger than ever, permeating the very air. They breathe that asterisk, and unseen force begins to toy with them. Equipment flies through the air, rifles are ripped from their hands. Soldiers are suddenly slammed into trees or dragged across the ground by invisible restraints. Sounds, loud cracks and thumps as men are thrown around, distorted shouts and gasps for air. The terrifying it seems to laugh at them. Asterisk, the unseen entity, the ancient guardian of the Whispering Lands, began its final assault. Equipment was ripped from their hands, rifles torn away with unseen force, and were slammed against trees with brutal impact, or dragged across the muddy ground by invisible restraints, their desperate cries swallowed by the overwhelming sounds. This was not a spirit of the dead, it was a predator, an ancient entity, toying with its prey. Asterisk, Sergeant Riley, battered and desperate, tries to rally his remaining men. He sees faint, ethereal, glowing eyes, not human, not animal, but ancient and malevolent, appear and vanish in the darkness surrounding the tree. Sounds, Riley's strange shouts, the high-pitched, mournful wail returns, louder and more agonizing, as if the entity is feeding on their fear. Asterisk, Sergeant Riley, battered and bleeding, tried to rally his remaining men. His eyes, desperate and terrified, caught glimpses of faint, ethereal glowing eyes appearing and vanishing in the oppressive darkness around the ancient tree. Not human, not animal, but ancient and filled with malevolence. The mournful wail returned, louder now, more agonizing, as if the entity was feeding on their profound fear and despair. Asterisk, one of the remaining soldiers might succumb to the psychological attack, frantically trying to communicate with the unseen force or turning his weapon on himself. Another soldier, in a moment of utter madness, sounds, the soldier's desperate, incoherent pleas, a sudden, sickening snap or crack sound, followed by silence. Asterisk, the psychological assault became unbearable. One of the remaining men, consumed by the overwhelming whispers, began to babble incoherently, his eyes wide with madness, seemingly trying to communicate with the unseen force. In a horrifying moment of complete breakdown, he might turn his weapon on himself or a fellow soldier, his final, desperate act a testament to the unendurable terror. Asterisk, Riley and Doc Davies are the last two, desperately trying to escape the clearing. They see the entire clearing begin to glow faintly with the malevolent light from the tree. The air is thick, suffocating. Sounds, the ambient hum, and hiss reach a terrifying crescendo. The ground itself seems to vibrate. Riley and Davies' final, ragged breaths as they fight their way out. Asterisk, Riley and Doc Davies, the last two, fought their way towards the edge of the clearing. The entire area began to glow faintly with the malevolent light emanating from the ancient tree, bathing the scene in an eerie, unearthly green. The air grew impossibly thick, suffocating them, as if the very forest was trying to swallow them. All, with every ounce of their remaining will, they clawed their way out, leaving the screaming echoes and the consumed souls behind. Asterisk, Riley and Davies, utterly broken and disoriented, stumble out of the untouched jungle, perhaps into a more familiar but still dangerous part of the war zone. Their uniforms are torn, their faces etched with profound trauma. Sounds, the sounds of the deep jungle are gone, replaced by the more familiar, though still harsh, sounds of the Vietnamese countryside, distant small arms fire, the occasional helicopter. The rain has stopped. Asterisk, they crawled out of the ancient jungle to broken men from a squad of 8. They carried no bullet wounds from the Viet Cong, but the scars etched onto their minds were deeper, far more insidious. They had faced an enemy beyond their comprehension, an ancient, consuming entity that had stripped them of their sanity piece by agonizing piece. Asterisk, a shot of Riley and Davies back at base camp. They are isolated, unable to articulate the true horror. Other soldiers look at them with suspicion or pity. They are perpetually tired, their eyes holding a distant, fearful look. Sounds, the ambient sounds of a military base, distant chatter, vehicles, but they all sound muted, alien, as if the survivors are still trapped in their own silent nightmare. Asterisk, their fragmented reports of whispers, glowing eyes, and An unseen force were met with medical diagnoses of severe combat fatigue, jungle madness. They were quickly sent home, their story filed away as another tragic, if inexplicable, casualty of the psychological toll of the war. But they knew the truth. They had walked into a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where ancient legends still breathed, and where the forest itself was a living, malevolent entity, asterisk a final. Aerial shot of the vast, green, innocent-looking Vietnamese jungle. Camera slowly zooms in on the specific area of Sector 7 Gamma, which looks just like any other patch of trees, perhaps a slightly darker, more ominous green. The sounds of the jungle are peaceful again, just before the screen fades. To black, a very faint, lingering, almost imperceptible hum and a soft hiss can be heard, suggesting the horror still resides there waiting, asterisk the Vietnam War eventually ended. But for men like Sergeant Riley and Doc Davies, the conflict raged on within their minds. They had gone looking for a hidden enemy, only to become prey for something far older than any war. Deep within that untouched jungle, in the chilling heart of the Whispering Lands, the ancient guardian still watches, its hum resonating through the silent trees, its echoes drawing in the lost, for in that sacred, cursed place, the war continues long after the last soldier has left, and those who dare to trespass will forever carry the scars of the forest that remembers.